There are three things in this world that are inevitable: death, taxes, and a homeowners association president finding something to complain about. On this particular Tuesday, my HOA president was about to hit the trifecta of terribleness by bringing all three into my life. She just didn't know it yet. It all started with the beast. The beast wasn't some mythical creature. It was better. It was a 48 kilowatts liquid-cooled standby generator, a glorious behemoth of steel and power that sat squat and proud on a concrete slab at the edge of my property. I was giving it its monthly checkup, a ritual I performed with the solemnity of a high priest. I checked the oil, topped off the coolant, and ran a diagnostic that made it rumble with a deep, satisfying thrum, like a sleeping dragon clearing its throat. Most people in Maple Creek Estates had lawns they manicured with this much love. I had a diesel engine. My house, a modest two-bedroom bungalow, didn't need this kind of power. I could have powered my entire block and still had enough juice left over to jumpstart a locomotive. But the beast wasn't for me. It was for the Sunshine Meadows nursing home, the sprawling, gentle brick building that shared my back fence line. My grandfather, a man who taught me how to solder before I could properly tie my shoes, spent his last 2 years there. He was a brilliant, cantankerous old engineer, and during a massive outage one summer, I'd found him fuming in the dark because their dinky, underpowered backup generator had failed, taking the air conditioning and his precious electric recliner with it. "A travesty of engineering," he'd grumbled. "A glorified lawnmower engine powering a place full of people who actually need power." After he passed, I made a deal with the home's maintenance head, Dave. I was a recently retired software engineer with too much time and a decent amount of sold a useless app to a tech giant money. I bought the beast, had it professionally installed on my property, and ran a heavy-gauge, deeply buried armored cable to their primary electrical panel. They covered the fuel and upkeep. I handled the machine. It was a simple handshake deal between neighbors. For 3 years it had worked perfectly. The beast had kicked on 6 times, and the residents of Sunshine Meadows were never without their lights, their medical equipment, or, most importantly, their air conditioning. It was a beautiful arrangement, and beautiful arrangements are like magnets for people who want to ruin them. "Alexander." The voice cut through the warm afternoon air with the grating efficiency of a rusty saw. I didn't even have to look. I felt the presence behind me, a vortex of beige clothing and entitlement that could only belong to one person. I finished wiping down the diagnostic panel, took a deep breath, and turned. "Carol," I said, my voice as level as I could manage. "To what do I owe the displeasure?" Carol, the newly elected president of the Maple Creek Estates Homeowners Association, stood on the edge of my lawn, as if setting foot on it might soil her sensible walking shoes. She had hair sculpted by sheer force of will into a helmet of unflappable disapproval, and was clutching a 3-ring binder to her chest like it was the last holy text on earth. "That thing," she said, wrinkling her nose as if the beast had personally offended her ancestors. "It is quite the eyesore, isn't it?" "Only if your primary hobby is staring into your neighbor's yard, Carol," I replied, closing the generator's access panel with a satisfying click. "Which, you know, the binder might have a section on." Her eyes narrowed. She didn't appreciate my tone. People like Carol believe that because they volunteered for a position of imaginary authority, everyone else must treat them with the reverence of a visiting monarch. "I've been reviewing the bylaws," she said, tapping a perfectly manicured finger on the binder's plastic cover. "It's come to my attention that this monstrosity is an unapproved external structure." "Is it now?" I said, leaning against the beast's sturdy frame. "Funny, it was here when I bought the house. And it was here when you were just the lady who measured everyone's grass with a ruler. I'm pretty sure that makes it grandfathered in. The term grandfathered in is a colloquialism often misused by people attempting to circumvent established regulations, she said, her voice taking on a robotic lecture hall quality. Section C, subsection 4, paragraph 2 of the Maple Creek Estates Covenants is perfectly clear. All external modifications, permanent or otherwise, including but not limited to sheds, patios, and large-scale power generation equipment, must be submitted with accompanying schematics for committee approval. Was this submitted, Alexander? I stared at her. Large-scale power generation equipment? Is that really in there? I took the liberty of proposing the amendment at my first meeting, she said with a smug little smile. It passed unanimously. I was the only one there. Of course she was. The level of petty evil was almost impressive. Carol, this generator serves a purpose, a very important purpose. I gestured over my shoulder with my thumb toward the nursing home, its windows glinting in the sun. It helps the lovely people next door. She glanced at Sunshine Meadows for a fraction of a second, her expression unchanged. It was like showing a cat a calculus equation. The information just didn't compute. To her, the world was divided into two categories, things that complied with the HOA binder and things that must be destroyed. All residents are expected to comply, she stated flatly. You will receive a formal notice of violation in the mail. You have 30 days to have the structure removed. Good day. She turned, her back ramrod straight, and marched back toward her own beige house, the binder held high. I watched her go, a cold knot forming in my stomach. This wasn't just a friendly warning. This was a declaration of war. A few days later, my phone buzzed. It was Dave from the nursing home. His voice was a cheerful, gravelly rumble that always made me feel a little better about the world. Big storm's coming this weekend, Alex, he said, no preamble. Weather Service is calling it a real nasty one. A derecho, whatever the hell that is. Sounds angry. You got the beast ready to roar? Gassed up and raring to go, Dave, I said, pacing my small living room. But we might have a problem named Carol. She's the new HOA president. Dave let out a hearty laugh that crackled over the phone. Oh, her. Don't you worry about her, son. Last month she tried to fine me because the nursing home's welcome mat wasn't on the approved seasonal color palette. Said our cheerful welcome spring message was inappropriate for early autumn. Brenda, our director, used a few words with her that aren't in the HOA binder. I can tell you that. I don't know, Dave, I sighed, looking out the window toward Carol's house. I could see her through her front window, meticulously cleaning her already spotless blinds. There's a glint in her eye. The kind of glint that says she'd burn down a village to enforce a rule about putting your recycling bins out an hour too early. Just ignore her. People like that run on attention. Starve 'em out, he advised. I hope you're right. But I had a bad feeling. A very bad feeling. The weather reports grew more dire as the week went on. High winds, torrential rain, and the part that always got my attention, widespread power outages were all but guaranteed for Saturday night. People were panic buying milk and bread. I was panic buying peace of mind. That afternoon, I went to my workshop. I took a sheet of thick plastic, printed out a message in the largest, boldest, most idiot-proof font I could find, and laminated it. I used 3 heavy-duty zip ties to attach it directly to the big, red handle of the beast's main disconnect switch. It read, "Critical medical equipment. Do not touch. This unit provides emergency power to Sunshine Meadows Nursing Home." Yes, the big brick building right there. You can't miss it. Tampering is a felony. I added the last 2 lines myself. A little white lie, maybe, but in a war against baseless regulations, you have to fight dirty. I stood back and admired my work. It was clear, concise, and had just the right amount of passive aggression. No one, not even a person whose entire personality was a violation notice, could possibly misunderstand this. Right? Saturday night arrived, and it brought the storm with it as promised. The sky turned a bruised purple-gray, and the wind began to howl a mournful, angry song. I made popcorn, put on a loud action movie, and settled onto my couch, feeling smug and prepared. I loved storms like this when I knew I had the upper hand. Around 9:45 p.m., the lights flickered once, twice. Then, with a final, apologetic buzz from the refrigerator, my house was plunged into absolute darkness and silence. The only sounds were the wind and the rain lashing against the windows like handfuls of thrown gravel. I sat in the dark, counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. From the backyard came a low hum, the sound of a powerful starter motor engaging. It cranked for a second, then erupted into a steady, confident roar. The beast was alive. A single lamp in my living room, the one I'd wired directly to the generator's output for monitoring purposes, flickered to life, casting a warm, reassuring glow. I walked to the window and peered through the rain-streaked glass. My street was a black hole. Every house was dark. But next door, it was a different story. The windows of Sunshine Meadows were blazing with light, a defiant beacon in the stormy blackness. I could see the silhouettes of nurses moving calmly in the hallways. A wave of satisfaction washed over me. This was why I did it. My satisfaction was short-lived. My eyes caught a flicker of movement across the street. A figure, clad head to toe in a hideous canary-yellow rain slicker, was marching across the road. They held a large, powerful flashlight, its beam cutting a wobbly path through the deluge. The figure reached the curb, stepped onto my lawn, and began marching with grim determination directly toward the sound of the beast. It was Carol. "Oh no," I whispered to my empty living room. "She wouldn't. She couldn't possibly be that monumentally stupid." I watched, my popcorn completely forgotten, as the little yellow slickered harbinger of doom reached my side yard. Her flashlight beam danced over the generator, finally landing on the big red switch. She paused for a moment. I imagined her reading my sign, her brain short-circuiting as it tried to reconcile the words critical medical equipment with her sacred binder. This was going to be so much worse than a fine. I scrambled for my jacket and shoes, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. This was no longer a game. I burst out my side door and was immediately hit by a wall of wind and water. The rain was coming down in sheets, cold and unforgiving. The roar of the generator was deafening up close. "Carol!" I screamed, my voice barely carrying over the storm. "What in the name of all that is holy are you doing?" She was there, right next to the beast, her yellow hood plastered to her head. She had both hands on the big red disconnect handle and was pulling with all her might. My beautifully laminated sign was on the ground, a puddle forming on its face, a muddy heel print marring the word critical. She saw me, and a look of righteous fury crossed her face. "I'm enforcing the bylaws, Alexander!" she shrieked back, her voice thin and reedy against the engine's roar. "It is after the 10 p.m. noise curfew. This is an unacceptable violation." "It's a power outage," I yelled, stumbling closer. "Did you not read the sign I put right on the switch? It powers the nursing home. People need it. There are oxygen machines, Carol." "A likely story," she screeched, giving the handle another furious yank. It didn't budge. "Those things are built to be stiff. You can't just decide the rules don't apply to you. Your noise is disrupting the peace and quiet of this community. This is exactly the kind of chaos I was elected to prevent." It was like arguing with a hurricane. Her reality was so warped, her perception so filtered through the lens of her stupid binder that actual reality couldn't get in. Before I could reach her, she braced her feet, let out a guttural grunt, and put her entire body weight into one final, triumphant heave. There was a loud clunk. The effect was instantaneous and absolute. The mighty roar of the beast died, replaced by an eerie, profound silence broken only by the wind and rain. The world went from a wall of sound to nothing. All the lights at Sunshine Meadows, the beacon in the storm, winked out at once, plunging the entire scene into a terrifying, primordial darkness. The only illumination was the beam of Carol's flashlight, which she shone triumphantly on the now silent generator switch, then swung over to my horrified face. A smug, wet smile spread across her lips. "There," she said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "Peace and quiet, as per Section F, Subsection 9 of the Community Bylaws." At that exact moment, my phone, which I was clutching in a white-knuckled grip, began to ring. The screen lit up with Dave's name. I answered it, my hand shaking. "Alex? What the hell happened?" Dave's voice was frantic, panicked. "Everything just died. All our lights, everything. The oxygen concentrators are on their battery backups, but they'll only last 15, maybe 20 minutes. We've got 3 residents who can't be without them." I stared at Carol, who was still looking at me with that proud, idiotic grin, waiting for me to congratulate her on her victory. My blood ran cold. "You have no idea," I said to her, my voice deadly calm and quiet in the sudden stillness. "You have absolutely no idea what you've just done." Her smile faltered, just for a second. The first flicker of doubt. It was too little, far too late. "I need to turn it back on," I said, pushing past her. I grabbed the big red handle. It was heavy, but I was running on pure adrenaline. I pulled. Nothing. I pulled harder, my feet slipping in the mud. The switch felt like it was welded in place. "What did you do?" I asked, turning on her. "I'm not going to let you just turn it back on and violate the rules again," she said, her confidence returning. "I took precautions." She held up her flashlight to illuminate her handiwork. A thick, heavy-duty padlock, the kind you see on storage units, was threaded through the switch's lockout hasp, securing it firmly in the off position. "For compliance," she added, as if that explained everything. "You padlocked it," I said, my voice flat with disbelief. "You padlocked the power to a nursing home." For a moment, I just stared at the lock, at the rain dripping from Carol's smug face, at the terrifying darkness where a building full of vulnerable people should have been lit up. My brain struggled to process the sheer, weaponized stupidity of the situation. Then, the anger hit me like a physical blow. "Give me the key, Carol." "I will not. This is to ensure the violation is not repeated until it can be formally addressed by the committee." "There is no committee! You are the committee!" I roared. "My grandfather died in that building. There are people in there who need those machines to breathe. Give me the damn key." "You're being hysterical, Alexander, and I will not be threatened." I took a step toward her, and for the first time, she flinched. But I knew violence wouldn't solve anything. It would just make me the bad guy. I pulled out my phone, my fingers fumbling on the wet screen. 911, what is your emergency?" The dispatcher's voice was calm, professional. "Hi, yes, my name is Alex. I live at 12 Maple Lane. My neighbor has just deliberately cut the power to the Sunshine Meadows nursing home next door." There was a pause. "Sir, did you say she cut the power to a nursing home?" "Yes. She shut down my backup generator, which is their sole source of power in this outage, and padlocked the switch." "Is this an HOA dispute, sir?" the dispatcher asked, a hint of weariness in her voice. "It started as an HOA dispute. I said, my voice rising. "It has now become a reckless endangerment situation. The head of maintenance just called me. Their oxygen concentrators are running on batteries that are about to die. You need to send someone right now." The dispatcher's tone shifted. "Okay, sir, we're dispatching a unit immediately." Carol watched me hang up, her arms crossed. "Calling the police? How dramatic. They'll see that I was simply upholding the community standards you agreed to when you purchased your home." 5 minutes later, a patrol car came slicing through the darkness, its red and blue lights painting the rain-swept scene in a farcical, strobe-lit tableau. 2 officers got out. One was older, with a graying mustache, and a face that said he'd seen it all and was deeply tired of it. The other was young, barely out of his 20s, with an earnest haircut and a brand-new notepad that he was already trying to shield from the rain. The older one, whose name tag read Miller, took in the scene. Me, drenched and furious. Carol, standing proudly next to the silent generator like she'd just won a blue ribbon at the county fair. And the dark, ominous silhouette of the nursing home. He let out a long, slow sigh and pinched the bridge of his nose. "Okay," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Someone start talking. And please, for the love of God, start from a place that makes some kind of sense." Carol, naturally, spoke first. "Officer, thank you for coming. This man," she pointed at me, "was running this illegal, unapproved machine in direct violation of the community's noise ordinance. I, as the duly elected president of the Homeowners Association, took corrective action. He is now harassing me." Miller stared at her for a long moment, then turned his tired eyes to me. "And your side?" "My side is that the machine is a backup generator that powers the nursing home next door during outages like this one. She shut it down and padlocked it. There are 85 elderly residents in that building, and she just cut their lifeline over a noise complaint." Miller's gaze drifted to the padlock, then to the dark building. He looked back at Carol. "Ma'am, let me get this straight. You came onto this man's property and deliberately cut the power to the building full of old people because the generator was too loud?" "It's a clear violation," Carol insisted, holding up her binder as if it were a shield. The rain was running off the plastic cover. "The bylaws are the law of this community, officer. I have a duty to enforce them without prejudice." The younger officer, Henderson, dutifully wrote this down. "Did you have a warrant to enter the property and tamper with the equipment, ma'am?" he asked, looking up from his soggy notes. Carol scoffed. "A warrant? I have the HOA binder. It's better than a warrant. It's a covenant." Miller looked like his soul was trying to leave his body. He turned to me. "Can you verify that this thing actually powers that building?" "Their head of maintenance called me in a panic less than 10 minutes ago," I said, my voice shaking with urgency. "Their oxygen concentrators are about to fail. Call them. Ask for Dave or the director, Brenda." Miller nodded, a grim look on his face. "Henderson," he said to his partner, "go next door. Verify the story. Now." Henderson, looking a little overwhelmed, nodded and jogged off into the darkness toward the nursing home. We stood there in an awkward, wet silence for a minute. Miller stared at the generator. I stared at Miller. Carol stared at the heavens, a martyr in a yellow raincoat. Henderson came sprinting back, his face pale in the flashing lights. "Sir, he's right. It's pitch black in there. They're using flashlights. The director she's very, very upset. She confirmed they have 3 residents on oxygen and the batteries are flashing red. She's demanding we arrest this woman." He pointed a slightly trembling finger at Carol. Miller's demeanor changed. The weariness was replaced by a hard edge. He took a step toward Carol. "Ma'am, you have created a life-threatening situation. I need the key to that padlock, now." "I will not be bullied," Carol said, her chin jutting out. "That is my personal property. You can't force me." Miller rubbed his face. "She's technically right," he said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "Cutting the lock would be destruction of private property. Without a warrant or her consent, our hands are tied. This is a civil matter that has somehow become a potentially criminal one that I can't immediately solve because of a $50 padlock." Fantastic. My heart sank. Bureaucracy. Even with lives on the line, we were drowning in bureaucracy. The cops were stuck. Carol was immovable, and time was running out. My mind raced. There had to be another way. And then it hit me. There was one person who hated bureaucracy and stupidity more than anyone I knew. I pulled out my phone again. "Gus's Electrical. You got a problem, I got a price." The voice on the other end was a gravelly bark. "Gus, it's Alex, from the big generator install on Maple Lane a few years back." "Alex, yeah, I remember, the beast. Don't tell me she finally blew a gasket." "Worse," I said, shouting to be heard over a new gust of wind. "I have an emergency. A woman has padlocked my generator." There was a pause. I could hear the faint sound of a TV in the background. "A woman did what now? Did you say padlocked?" "Yes. She's the HOA president. She padlocked the main disconnect switch while it was running. It powers the nursing home next door. Their emergency systems are failing. The cops are here, but they say they can't cut the lock." I heard a long, weary sigh, a sound that carried a lifetime of dealing with idiots. "An HOA president," Gus grumbled. "Say no more. They're a special breed. All the ego of a CEO with none of the power, so they gotta make their own. Okay, kid. Emergency rates apply. And I'm charging you extra for the sheer, unadulterated stupidity of the situation. I'll be there in 20. The 20 minutes felt like an eternity. Miller was on his radio, trying to explain the situation to a supervisor who clearly couldn't believe what he was hearing. Henderson was trying to reason with Carol, who was now quoting sections of the binder at him about property lines and nuisance abatement. I was pacing, my eyes fixed on the dark windows of Sunshine Meadows, imagining the worst. Then, a pair of headlights cut through the rain. A beat-up, graffiti-covered work van that looked like it had survived a war pulled up to the curb. Gus climbed out. He was a mountain of a man, built like a vending machine, with a bald head, a thick gray beard, and arms covered in faded tattoos. He moved with a slow, deliberate purpose, his face set in a permanent look of profound disappointment in the human race. He lumbered over, his eyes taking in the whole ridiculous scene. He looked at the cops, at me, at a still prattling Carol, and finally at the shiny new padlock on my generator. He let out a low whistle. "That's the problem?" he asked, his voice even deeper in person. "That's the problem," I confirmed. Gus turned to Officer Miller. "You can't cut that lock?" Miller shook his head, looking deeply embarrassed. "Destruction of private property, pal. We need a warrant. The on-call judge lives 40 minutes away, and I can't guarantee he'll even sign off on it before morning." Gus nodded slowly, a strange light glinting in his eye. He looked from the lock to Carol, then back to me. "Let me get a few things straight for the paperwork," he said, his voice all business. "You, Alex, are my client, right? You're paying me to get this generator running again?" "Yes, absolutely, whatever it costs," I said, practically vibrating with a mixture of hope and anxiety. "Okay," Gus continued, his gaze unwavering. "And this padlock, it's preventing me from performing the work I've been contracted to do." "That's right," I said. "And this generator is on your property." "Yes." Gus allowed a small, grim smile to touch his lips. "Well then, as I see it, this lock constitutes an unauthorized and dangerous modification to your equipment. It's a safety hazard. I'm not cutting her lock. I'm simply restoring your multi-thousand-dollar machine to its operational factory specifications by removing a foreign obstruction." He turned and lumbered back to his van. Carol watched him go, a confused look on her face. "What is he doing?" Gus returned, holding the largest pair of bolt cutters I had ever seen. They looked like the jaws of a mechanical dinosaur. He walked straight up to the generator. Carol finally realized what was about to happen and let out a horrified shriek. "You can't do that! That's my property! That lock cost me $49.99 at the hardware store. It's contractor grade." Gus didn't even look at her. He positioned the massive jaws of the cutters around the thick steel shackle of the padlock. He looked at Officer Miller and gave him a slight nod. Miller, in a moment of beautiful, silent understanding, turned his back to observe the storm. Henderson quickly followed his partner's lead. Snip! The sound was shockingly loud and final. The heavy padlock, severed clean in two, fell to the muddy ground with a pathetic thud. Gus turned, holding the two halves of the lock in his palm. He held them out to Carol. "You can bill me," he said. He then turned back to the generator, grabbed the big red handle with both hands, and with a grunt threw the switch. For the second time that night, the world changed in an instant. The beast roared back to life, its powerful engine a symphony of salvation. A moment later, a collective gasp went through our small crowd as, next door, the windows of Sunshine Meadows blinked and then blazed with light. A smattering of spontaneous applause broke out from Henderson. Even Miller cracked a smile. Just as a wave of relief so powerful it almost made me dizzy washed over me, a car came screeching to a halt at the curb, its tires spraying water. The door flew open, and a woman got out. It was Brenda, the director of Sunshine Meadows. And if I thought Carol looked determined, Brenda looked like a Valkyrie ready to ferry souls to the afterlife. And she had a very specific soul in mind. She was a kind-looking woman in her 50s, usually seen wearing floral dresses and a warm smile. Tonight, she wore a look of cold, concentrated fury. Her eyes scanned the scene and locked onto the one person holding a binder. She marched directly toward Carol. "Are you the woman who did this?" Brenda asked, her voice low and shaking with rage. Carol, ever the fool, puffed up her chest. "I am the HOA president, and I was simply enforcing the agreed-upon community bylaws to ensure a peaceful—" "Peaceful?" Brenda's voice cracked like a whip. "Let me tell you about peaceful. One of my residents, Mr. Gable, in room 204, is a 92-year-old veteran with severe COPD. His oxygen concentrator's battery failed 30 seconds before the power came back on. He went into respiratory arrest. He is alive right now because 2 of my nurses performed manual resuscitation, while that young officer," she gestured to a wide-eyed Henderson, "ran our portable E-tank over to his room. But because of you and your binder, he suffered a major medical event and has been transported to the hospital. On a night like this..." The air went out of the yard. The situation snapped from farcical to deadly serious. Officer Miller's face hardened into a granite mask. He stepped forward, all traces of weariness gone. "Okay, ma'am," he said to Carol, his voice leaving no room for argument. "This is no longer a civil dispute or a potential crime. You are under arrest for felony reckless endangerment." Carol's face crumpled in total disbelief. "Arrest! You can't arrest me. I have rights. I have bylaws. I'm going to sue you. I'm going to sue all of you. This is harassment." Henderson, looking much more confident now, stepped forward and took her arm. "Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent," he began, as she continued to shriek about covenants and lawsuits and her precious binder, which she dropped in the mud as he expertly cuffed her hands behind her back. I stood there, next to Gus and Dave, who had shown up just in time to see the final act. We watched as Carol, the queen of the cul-de-sac, was placed, still squawking, into the back of the patrol car. The generator hummed its steady, peaceful tune. The immediate crisis was over. The fallout, I suspected, was just beginning. Gus wiped his hands on a rag and pulled out a carbon copy invoice book. He scribbled for a moment, tore off the top sheet, and handed it to me. "That'll be $500 for the emergency call-out," he said. He pointed to a second line item. "And that's $200 for the stupid HOA president surcharge." I looked at the bill, then at the receding taillights of the police car, and started to laugh. It was the best $700 I had ever spent. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I'd been run over by a truck, but my phone was a beehive of activity. The legend of the HOA showdown had already spread through Maple Creek Estates with the speed of light. There was a text from Dave. "Mr. Gable is okay. Grumpy, but stable. Docs are keeping him for observation. Brenda is on a full-blown warpath. The nursing home's parent company, some massive corporate entity called Silver Thread Senior Living, has their top lawyers involved. You're in the clear." A call from my neighbor, 2 doors down, Mrs. Gable, no relation to the man in the hospital, ironically, who breathlessly recounted seeing Carol's arrest from her window and wanted all the juicy details. "She fined me last spring because my wind chimes were non-compliant with ambient noise regulations. I hope they throw the book at her." Then there was the email. It was from a lawyer at Silver Thread Senior Living. It was formal, full of legalese, but the message was simple. "Thank you. Please send us the bill for any and all expenses incurred. A representative will be in touch to get your statement for our civil suit against Miss Carol Peterson. Rest assured, you will be fully indemnified." I sat at my kitchen table, nursing a massive mug of coffee, and reflected on the sheer, unadulterated chaos of the last 12 hours. I hadn't wanted to be a hero. I just wanted to be a good neighbor and keep my grandfather's memory alive in my own weird, over-engineered way. I checked the local news website. There, at the bottom of the page, was a small story with a blurry, rain-streaked photo of my generator. The headline read, "Local HOA dispute leads to hospitalization, arrest." I chuckled and took a sip of coffee. A week later, I got a flyer on my door. "Emergency HOA meeting. Agenda, recent events and leadership review." My first instinct was to ignore it, but my morbid curiosity got the better of me. The community clubhouse, a sterile room that usually hosted sad potlucks, was packed to the gills. I had never seen more than 5 people at an HOA meeting. Tonight, there must have been 50. I slipped into a chair in the back, hoping to remain anonymous. It didn't work. Heads turned. People whispered. I saw Mrs. Gable give me a thumbs up. I felt like a gunslinger who had just walked into the town saloon after cleaning out the bad guys. It was deeply uncomfortable. The remaining 2 HOA board members, a terrified-looking accountant and a woman who seemed on the verge of tears, sat at the front table. The accountant cleared his throat and read from a prepared statement. "And in light of the ongoing criminal investigation and the significant civil lawsuit filed by Silver Thread Senior Living against Miss Peterson personally, the board has voted for her immediate and permanent removal as president and as a member of this association." A wave of applause and cheers erupted in the room. The accountant flinched. The floodgates opened. For the next hour, residents stood up and shared their own stories of Carol's petty tyranny. The man who was fined for having a pink flamingo. The family who got a violation, noticed because their basketball hoop was an unapproved color. The woman who was told her garden gnomes were tacky and lowered property values. It was a mass exorcism of suburban frustration. I didn't say a word. I just sat there, sipping the terrible, watery coffee they'd provided, as my legend grew with each new story. I was the man who had single-handedly slain the HOA dragon. All I'd really done was own a generator and make a few phone calls, but in the quiet, beige battleground of Maple Creek Estates. That was enough. A month later, life had returned to something resembling normal. I was out in the yard, performing the beast's monthly checkup. The air was cool and crisp, a perfect autumn day. Holding a grudge? I turned. It was Dave, leaning on my fence, a wide grin on his face. He was holding a large gift basket. "Just making sure she's ready for the next battle," I said, patting the beast's metal hide. "Well, you can stand down the troops," Dave said, handing the basket over the fence. "This is from everyone at Sunshine Meadows. The residents all signed a card." The basket was overflowing with high-end coffee, fresh pastries from their kitchen, and, I was happy to see, a hefty gift card to the local hardware store. Tucked inside was also a very official-looking document in a cheap frame. It was from the new HOA board. It was titled Community Hero Proclamation, and it officially recognized my selfless service. More importantly, it declared a permanent, ironclad, non-revocable variance for 48 kilowatts standby generator located at 12 Maple Lane, exempting it from all current and future bylaws regarding noise, appearance, or placement in perpetuity, forever and ever. Amen. "The new board voted unanimously," Dave said, chuckling. "They're terrified of you." "Terrified of me?" I asked, a smile spreading across my face. "I'm just a guy with a loud generator." "Nah," Dave said, his eyes twinkling. "You're the guy who got Carol arrested. Around here, that makes you a legend. By the way, heard she pleaded out last week. 2 years probation and a fine that'll make her eyes water for a decade. Had to sell her house to cover the down payment on the settlement with Silver Thread. They moved somewhere out of state. Somewhere with no HOA. I looked at the framed proclamation, then at the humming generator, and then over at the nursing home, where a few residents were enjoying the autumn sun on the patio. "Huh," I said, a feeling of deep, quiet satisfaction settling over me. "Well, how about that?" I finished my checks, gave the beast a fond pat, and went back inside, the gift basket in my arms. I had finally achieved my ultimate goal, to be left completely alone. And for the first time, the steady, powerful hum of the beast in the background was, to me, the most peaceful sound in the world.